trees on Mars? It sounds like something straight out of science fiction, doesn't it?
Yeah, like something you'd see in a movie.
But that's exactly what some scientists are seriously exploring right now. We're diving into some brand new research about terraforming Mars, making it more Earth-like.
Mm-hmm.
And get this, they're looking at where those very first Martian trees might actually, take root.
Cool.
Our source for this deep dive is this recent article from space.com. It's got some wild possibilities in it, let me tell you.
Yeah, I saw that one. It's pretty fascinating.
So it goes way beyond just getting any old plants to grow on Mars.
Oh, yeah.
They're talking about what it would take to make full-blown trees actually thrive.
Right, like a whole forest, that kind of thing.
That's a whole other level of complicated,
For
right?
sure, because we're not exactly dealing with, a welcoming environment here.
Exactly. Mars is not exactly known for its hospitality.
Yeah.
So, what are we really up against when it comes to the current Martian climate?
Well, Mars right now, it's super hostile to life, like any kind of life as we know it.
Yeah.
In fact, the article, it quotes this researcher, Robert Olszewski, and he says, straight up, the atmospheric conditions existing on Mars today make the existence of life impossible.
Impossible. Wow. Okay, so then how do we even start to wrap our heads around a challenge like that?
Well, that's where this whole concept of terraforming comes in.
Right, terraforming.
It's basically like, modifying a planet's whole environment, making it more like Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, they're focused on warming up Mars enough so that trees can actually survive.
Okay, so basically we got to crank up the Martian thermostat, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But how do we actually, do that?
Well, this research is looking at different ways to increase the greenhouse effect on Mars. They're talking about using a bunch of CO2 in the atmosphere, like concentrated CO2.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that'll trap more heat from the sun, and that'll raise the temperature of the whole planet.
Oh, so like a giant blanket of CO2 covering the whole planet.
Yeah, kind of like that.
That sounds pretty ambitious, to say the least.
It is. It's a massive undertaking, for sure. But here's where things get kind of crazy.
Okay, lay it on me.
You'd think, right, that the warmest part of Mars, the tropics, would be the best place for trees.
Yeah, makes sense, right? More sun, more warmth.
Well, turns out this research suggests otherwise.
Really?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't the tropics be the best spot?
Well, you see, Mars has this elliptical orbit, which is totally different from Earth's orbit, which is more circular.
Oh, right.
And because of that, the southern hemisphere of Mars actually ends up having, much warmer summers.
Huh, interesting.
Plus, there's this region called the Hellas Basin. It's this giant impact crater in the southern hemisphere.
Okay.
And it sits really low, it's way lower than the surrounding areas.
Mm.
And because of that, it acts like a natural heat trap.
So it's like a combination of the orbit and this weird geography that creates this surprisingly warm spot.
Exactly.
That's wild. Okay, but let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What do trees actually need to survive on Mars?
Right.
What are the specific must-haves?
Well, the research highlights a few really key things.
Okay.
First off, the temperature, obviously. It needs to be way warmer than it is now, significantly warmer.
Yeah.
And it can't just be warm during the day. It has to hold that warmth overnight, too, because Mars has these crazy temperature swings.
Oh, yeah. Those Martian nights can get pretty brutal, I imagine.
Exactly. Like a Martian cold snap would probably just wipe out a regular tree.
Yeah, no kidding. So warmer temperatures for sure. What else?
They'd also need a growing season of at least 110 Martian days.
110.
Yeah, they're called sols, Martian days.
Right, souls.
So it's like creating a Martian summer, but it has to be long enough for the trees to actually, thrive.
Like a Martian summer vacation for trees. I like it. Okay, so warmth and time. What about the other essentials? Like water, CO2 levels, all that stuff.
Yeah, you're right. Those are super important, too. But the main focus of this research is temperature.
Okay.
They're saying that's the biggest obstacle we got to overcome.
Makes sense.
They actually use data from the Viking Mars landers to figure out exactly how much warming is needed.
No way.
Yeah.
That's so cool, using data from these decades-old missions to solve these futuristic problems.
I know, right? It's pretty amazing.
So what are they saying? How much warming do we need?
Well, the numbers show that we need to raise the average temperature in that Hellas Basin area, that crater we talked about, by a lot, a significant amount, to make it even remotely suitable for trees.
Wow, okay.
And the research, it outlines specific temperature ranges that they've identified as being ideal.
So pretty precise targets then.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask, what kind of trees are we even talking about here? Like, what could actually survive in a place like the Hellas Basin?
Right.
And what about oxygen? We haven't even touched on that, but that seems pretty crucial, right?
You're absolutely right. Oxygen is a huge factor.
Yeah.
And the article, it does mention that too.
Okay, good.
But as for the trees themselves, they're looking at types that can handle, like, harsher conditions.
Okay.
Things like conifers, like pine trees and firs.
Oh, so we're picturing a Martian forest full of, like, evergreens.
Yeah, something like that.
It's starting to feel a little more real now, not just like a sci-fi fantasy.
I know, right? It's exciting to think about.
It is. But even with those tough trees in that perfect spot in the Hellas Basin, we're still talking about a ridiculously massive task.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, transforming a whole planet is no joke. And this brings up another point, like, how does this whole idea of a Martian tree line compare to what we see here on Earth?
Yeah, that's a good question. See, on Earth, the highest tree lines are usually in the tropics.
Right, where it's warmest.
Exactly. That's where you get the most consistent warmth and sunlight.
But you said earlier that the Martian tropics aren't ideal because of that wacky orbit.
Yeah, exactly.
So are we basically flipping the script on how we think about tree growth?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, the conditions on Mars are so different from Earth. We have to rethink our whole understanding of what a tree needs to thrive.
Wow.
We can't just take what we know from Earth and apply it directly to Mars.
It's like we need a whole new rule book for tree growth, like Martian Tree Growth 101.
Yeah, exactly. A whole new set of rules.
This really shows just how complex and challenging this whole terraforming thing really is.
Oh, it is. But it's also, like, incredibly exciting to imagine the possibilities. Like, if we could actually pull this off.
Hold on. I have so many questions about the if part of that statement.
I know, right. And that's exactly what we're going to be diving into next. If we could pull this off, what would a Martian forest even look like?
Yeah, okay, now we're talking.
Would it be like those lush rainforests we see on Earth?
That's where I want to go with this.
Or would it be something totally alien,
Yeah, right. Like, what would it actually look like?
Well, this research doesn't really dive deep into the whole aesthetics of a Martian forest, but it does throw out some pretty cool possibilities.
Oh, really? Okay, like what?
They say those first Martian trees might actually be genetically engineered.
Genetically engineered trees.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. So we're not just talking about planting Earth trees on Mars. We're talking about, like, creating a whole new type of tree.
Exactly, like specifically designed for Martian life.
Okay, that's next level.
Right, so they might need things like enhanced radiation resistance.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
Maybe the ability to pull water from the thin Martian atmosphere.
Wow.
Or even like bioluminescent properties so they can use that weaker sunlight.
Bioluminescent trees. Whoa, hold on. Stop the presses.
Yeah.
That's a sight I'd pay to see.
Right.
Imagine like a Martian forest glowing in the dark.
It'd be incredible, wouldn't it?
It'd be like something straight out of Avatar.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but think about what that would mean for, like, future human settlements.
Oh, absolutely.
If we could create these self-sustaining forests, it could give us oxygen, building materials, maybe even food.
It's like building a whole new ecosystem from scratch, like a Martian biodome. Right, and we could live in it.
Exactly.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's a long-term goal, for sure.
Yeah.
But this research is saying it's not totally impossible.
Okay, so how are they figuring this stuff out?
Well, one thing they did was use computer modeling
Oh, cool.
to simulate different terraforming scenarios, and they can actually predict how the Martian climate would respond.
So they're not just theorizing, they're actually running simulations.
Yeah, they're seeing how these ideas could play out in the real world.
Okay, that's impressive.
Right, and their models are suggesting something really interesting.
What's that?
That warming up the Hellas Basin could have this cascading effect.
Cascading effect. Okay, explain that.
Yeah, so it could potentially trigger the release of all this trapped CO2
Okay.
and water ice that's in the Martian soil.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying by warming up one region,
Yeah,
we could actually kickstart this planet-wide transformation?
exactly, like a chain reaction.
Whoa, that's wild.
Right, it's like giving Mars a little nudge.
And then letting the planet's own natural processes take over.
But I'm guessing there's still a ton of uncertainty about how this would all actually work.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're talking about a planet with a really complex history.
Yeah.
And a climate we're still trying to figure out,
Right. It's not like we can just flip a switch and suddenly Mars is a tropical paradise.
Exactly. It's this delicate balance, and terraforming would take constant monitoring and adjusting.
Right. We got to be careful not to mess things up even worse.
Exactly. Like, imagine if we accidentally trigger this runaway greenhouse effect.
Oh.
And Mars gets even hotter and more inhospitable.
Okay, nobody wants that.
Right. So it's not just about engineering, it's about planetary management, like on a grand scale.
Yeah, you're talking about a huge responsibility.
Huge. And that brings up another massive question.
Okay, I'm listening.
Who actually gets to decide if and how we terraform Mars?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Right. Are we talking about international treaties, corporate ventures?
Or like something else entirely.
Exactly. The article doesn't really get into specifics about planetary governance,
Okay.
but it does say we need to seriously think about this stuff and collaborate, you know?
Yeah.
Because terraforming Mars is a decision that would impact everyone on Earth, not just one country or company.
It's like deciding the fate of a whole world.
It is a lot of pressure.
That's heavy.
And we haven't even talked about the cultural and philosophical side of this.
Oh, yeah, like what?
Would terraforming another planet be seen as an act of creation or colonization, you know?
Right.
How would it change how we see ourselves in the universe?
Okay, now you're really making me think.
Right.
It's not just about the science and logistics. It's about our values and beliefs, too.
Exactly. Terraforming Mars isn't just a technical challenge, it's a philosophical one.
Wow, I like that.
And there's one more layer we need to talk about.
Okay, hit me.
What about the risks?
Risks, like what could go wrong with trying to transform a whole planet?
Well, for starters, we don't actually know if it would even work. It's possible we could spend centuries on this,
Yeah.
pour tons of resources into it, and Mars just goes back to how it is now.
So we end up right back where we started.
Exactly.
That's kind of depressing.
It is a sobering thought.
Yeah. And what about those unintended consequences we talked about before?
Oh, right. Like, what if we accidentally trigger a runaway greenhouse effect and make Mars even hotter?
Yikes.
Or what if we introduce some Earth microbes that contaminate the Martian environment?
Okay, now we're in like sci-fi disaster movie territory.
I know, right? But that's the point.
Yeah.
We're dealing with forces and systems way beyond our control.
That's a little scary.
It is terraforming as a gamble, and the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah, we're talking about creating a new home for humanity,
Right.
but also potentially destroying a whole planet.
Exactly.
This is definitely taking a turn.
Right.
I'm starting to see why this topic is so controversial.
Yeah.
It's not just about planting trees.
Yeah.
It's about weighing those benefits against the risks and all the ethical questions.
Yeah, exactly.
So where do we go from here?
Whoa.
We've talked about the possibilities, the challenges, the risks.
Yeah.
Is there any way to approach this responsibly?
That's the big question, isn't it? And luckily, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in the final part of this deep dive.
Okay, so we've talked about the how, the what, and even like what could go wrong with this whole terraforming Mars idea.
Right. All the big questions.
But now I'm wondering, is there actually like a path forward?
Yeah.
A way to approach this responsibly so it benefits everybody?
Well, that's definitely what we should be aiming for. And this research does offer some ideas.
Okay, like what?
They really emphasize taking things slow,
Okay.
like a phased approach to terraforming.
Phased approach.
Yeah, starting small, you know, little
Right.
experiments and then gradually scaling things up over time.
It's not just jumping right in.
Exactly. More like dipping our toes in the Martian water first.
Yeah, like that
Yeah.
analogy.
It's kind of like building a house. You don't start with the roof.
Right, got to build the foundation first.
Exactly. So in this case, that foundation might be like creating some enclosed biodomes
Oh, okay. All right,
or testing out different terraforming techniques, but just on a small area of Mars.
so start small, gather data, see what works, what doesn't,
Right, exactly.
and slowly expand from there.
It's a much more cautious approach than what we usually see in sci-fi movies.
Yeah, no kidding less about rushing to turn Mars into Earth 2.0.
Right,
More about taking it one step at a time.
exactly. A slow and steady kind of process.
But even with that approach, there are still so many questions like, who gets to make those decisions?
Yeah, that's a big one. And the research really stresses the need for international cooperation.
Okay.
Like, we need some kind of global framework for how we manage a planet.
Planetary governance. Whoa, that's a mouthful.
It is, but it's crucial.
Okay, so what kind of stuff are we talking about?
Well, we need to set some ground rules. You know, who gets to do what on Mars, how resources are managed, how to make sure everyone benefits from terraforming, not just a select few.
It's like we need a whole new system of laws, but for an entire planet.
Exactly, it's a tall order.
Yeah, no kidding.
But it's absolutely essential if we want to avoid conflict
Oh, yeah, for sure.
and exploitation. Imagine if one country or company just claimed ownership of a terraformed Mars.
Oh, yeah, that would be good.
Right, it'd be like the Wild West all over again, but on a planetary scale.
Definitely don't want to repeat those mistakes.
Nope. So this research is saying we need to start having those tough conversations now.
Yeah, about the ethics.
Exactly, the societal impacts, the philosophical questions, you know?
It's not just about the science.
No, it's about our values as humans
Right.
and what kind of future we want to create.
For ourselves and for Mars.
Exactly.
This is heavy stuff.
It is, and that's why this research is so important.
It's not just about can we do this, it's about should we do this.
Exactly. It's about making sure that if we do terraform Mars, it's for the right reasons and in a way that benefits all of humanity.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
It is.
We started this whole deep dive thinking about trees on Mars.
Yeah.
This seemingly simple idea,
Right.
but it's opened up this whole Pandora's box of questions about science, ethics, philosophy.
It has.
And it goes way beyond just Mars itself.
That's the amazing thing about science. It's
Yeah.
not just about finding answers, it's about asking the right question.
And pushing the boundaries of what we know.
Exactly. It's about expanding our understanding of our place in the universe.
So to everyone listening out there, keep those questions coming.
Yes.
Because the future of Mars is still being written.
It is.
And it's up to all of us to decide what that future is going to look like.